I was heading back from the river when I saw it. At first, I thought it was just a fallen branch, half buried in the melting snow, maybe part of the winter wreckage. But then it moved. Slow, deliberate, like it took every ounce of will just to breathe. I froze. My boots sank a little deeper into the slush as I stared. It was a lynx, big, scarred, and old. Her fur was patchy, matted with blood and mud. Her ribs poked out, like someone had sketched them in sharp angles. One of her hind legs dragged behind uselessly, and she was crawling, literally crawling, toward the stream inches at a time. I should have walked away. That was my first instinct. You don't mess with a wild cat, not even a dying one, especially not a lynx, with jaws like a bear trap and eyes that could cut through the dark. But something held me there. Maybe it was the way her body trembled, or how she kept her eyes on the water, not even glancing at me, like her thirst was stronger than fear. I took a step closer. The lynx flinched, let out a sound that wasn't quite a growl but wasn't a whimper either. I held up my hands. "I'm not gonna hurt you," I said out loud, knowing damn well she didn't understand a word, but still saying it made me feel less like a threat, more like a man. She tried to move again but collapsed with a quiet thud, her chin hitting the slush. Her breathing was ragged, steam puffing from her nostrils like a broken engine. I didn't plan on saving anything that day. I went to the river for firewood, not for moral dilemmas. But I stood there, knees locking, while my thoughts ran in circles. Let her die? Walk away? Wasn't that nature's way? Wasn't that how it was supposed to go? But I'd seen that look before. When my wife lay in that hospital bed, fighting for every breath, and the doctor said, "It's just a matter of time." I knew that look. The look that says, "I'm not ready yet." I dropped the firewood and walked over. The lynx didn't move. She just blinked once, slow and deliberate, like she was too tired to care anymore. "All right?" I muttered, slipping off my jacket. "Let's see what we can do." I wrapped the coat around her as gently as I could. She was colder than snow. Her body twitched when I lifted her, claws instinctively scraping my arm through the fabric. But she didn't have the strength to fight. I carried her like a bundle of broken branches, heavy but hollow. The walk back to the cabin felt longer than usual. Every sound in the woods made me turn. A crack of a twig, a distant bird call. The spring melt made everything damp, heavy, unpredictable. I could feel her weight pressing into my chest, not just physically, but emotionally. I had no idea what I was doing. Back at the cabin, I laid her on an old tarp by the wood stove. The fire had died down, but I stoked it fast. My hands shook as I lit fresh logs. Not from fear, at least I told myself that, but from something deeper, something like shame. I shouldn't have waited. She didn't move for hours. I sat nearby, watching her side rise and fall. Each breath looked like a struggle, like her chest was made of rusted metal. I poured some water into a bowl and set it near her head. She ignored it. I shredded a bit of dried venison and placed it next to the bowl. Still nothing. The air in the cabin was thick, not just from the smoke curling up the chimney but from the weight of what I'd brought inside. A wild animal, predator, a dying one, and me, a man who hadn't taken care of anything living in years. Not since Laura passed. I should have left her there, but I didn't. That night, I slept on the floor, not to be noble or protective, but because I didn't trust myself not to check on her every 10 minutes. I had this fear, this crawling, gut-twisting fear, that I'd wake up to find her gone. Not escaped, just gone. In the silence of early morning, I heard it. A scrape, then a slurp. She was drinking. I stayed still, watched. Her tongue moved like it hadn't touched water in days. Maybe it hadn't. After a few sips, she tried the meat. Not much, just a few tentative bites, like she didn't believe it was really there. When she saw me watching, she paused. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I swear I saw something shift. Recognition? Gratitude? No, not yet, but something. I whispered, "Good girl," like I used to say to our dog years ago. She went back to eating, and I sat there, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Purpose. The morning sun filtered through the cracked window pane, casting long bars of gold across the room. Dust motes floated through the air, dancing in the silence. She lay still, but her breathing was steadier now, less desperate. I got up and brewed some coffee. Old habits. I hadn't shared breakfast with anyone in years, yet there I was, talking to her like she was just another person at the table. "You've got a hell of a name coming," I muttered. can't keep calling you Lynx. I watched her blink slowly, her eyes heavy but aware. You need something tough, something that's survived. I looked out the window for inspiration, my mind swirling through names. Nothing felt right yet, but something told me I'd know when I saw it. For the rest of the day, I kept my distance, gave her space. I went about my routine, stacking wood, checking the traps, boiling more water. But my mind never left her side. Every sound from the cabin made me glance back. And that night, when I checked in on her again, she was curled up, not sprawled, not collapsed, curled. A small, tired thing making itself small, but alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, something broken inside me had shifted too. I didn't save her, not yet, but maybe we could save each other. The second day started with blood on the floor. Not a lot, but enough to stop me in my tracks as I stepped into the kitchen. A thin trail led from the tarp near the stove to the base of the fridge. I followed it, slow, cautious, like I was back in a combat zone instead of my own home. She was there, curled tight, wedged between the fridge and the wall, eyes wide and unblinking. Her chest rose and fell fast, panicked. Her injured leg was tucked awkwardly, and the blood had seeped into the floorboards. She wasn't growling, but her mouth was open just a little, teeth on display. "Easy," I said, dropping to a knee. She didn't move, but her ears flicked toward me. That was something. I backed off, went to the cupboard, grabbed a towel and warm water. I didn't know if she'd let me touch her, but I had to try. Infection didn't care about comfort zones. Back beside her, I kept my hands visible. "Let me help you," I said gently. "You stay calm, I stay calm." She watched me, unmoving. Her eyes were glassy, unfocused. Fever? Maybe. I dipped the towel and slowly reached out. She flinched but didn't swipe. I touched the edge of her paw and waited. No reaction. Carefully, I started cleaning around the wound. It was bad. Punctures deep into the muscle, already swelling. No way this was fresh. She'd been carrying it for days, maybe longer. I had antiseptic, but I'd have to get close for that. Close enough to lose a finger. So I talked to her, the whole time, about nothing, about everything, about Laura. I told her how my wife used to fill this kitchen with music and the smell of fresh bread. How the morning light used to come in through the same window she was curled beneath. How quiet the place had become since she died. She didn't move, but she didn't run either. That night I brought the meat raw. Not dry jerky, but fresh from the deer I'd quartered last fall. I laid it out, stepped back, and watched. She sniffed, slowly, hesitantly, then ate. It was the first time I saw her chew. The noise of it filled the room like thunder. I hadn't realized how loud silence had been until then. I started calling her Marla. No reason. It just fit. Something soft but sharp. Wild but old. She didn't seem to mind. Or maybe she didn't notice. But it made things easier for me. Gave her shape. Identity. Something beyond just the lynx. The third day was worse. She wouldn't eat. Wouldn't drink. She barely lifted her head when I came near. Her breath was fast. Shallow. The wound smelled off. I'd seen this before in dogs, in horses. Infection sets in and eats you from the inside out. I didn't have a vet. Closest one was hours away. She wouldn't survive the trip. So I did what I could. I boiled water, sterilized the knife, laid out gloves I hadn't touched since Laura got sick. I prepped the room like a field medic. All the while I talked, to her, to myself, to the God I hadn't spoken to in years. "Don't die on me," I whispered. "Not now." She let me near. I don't know why. Maybe she was too weak to fight. Maybe she finally saw me as something other than a threat. Maybe pain made allies of us both. I cleaned the wound, drained the worst of it, applied what antibiotics I had left from an old prescription. She whimpered once. That was the only sound. Then she passed out. I sat beside her all night, fire low. My eyes never left her side. The next morning, her fever broke. I knew it the second I stepped in and saw her lying stretched out, not curled, her breathing slower, her fur damp with sweat. I touched her forehead behind the ear, and it wasn't burning. It was warm, just warm. Relief hit me so hard I had to sit. She licked her paw, the healthy one, then looked at me not with fear but something closer to understanding. The days blurred after that. Marla started eating more. I gave her space to move, though she mostly stayed close to the stove. She limped less. The leg was still bad, but healing. I cleaned the wound twice a day, talk the whole time, and she'd just lie there, blinking, listening. At night, I'd hear her shifting on the floorboards, circling the spot before settling. The sounds became normal, familiar, like I wasn't alone anymore. One evening, maybe a week in, I caught myself cooking 2 portions of stew. One for me, one for her. She couldn't eat it, obviously, but I laughed anyway. Felt good to laugh again. I told her about the town, about the guy at the gas station who always talked too loud, about the woman at the grocery store who used to ask about Laura, even months after the funeral. I told her about the silence people give you when they don't know what to say, and how sometimes that silence is worse than anything else. She listened, or at least she didn't leave. Then one night, I fell asleep in the chair. When I woke up, the chair was cold, and she was gone. Panic punched me straight in the chest. I called her name, Marla, stumbled around the house, checked every corner. Nothing. Then I opened the front door. She was on the porch, sitting upright, watching the woods. I stepped outside. She didn't run, didn't even flinch, just turned her head slightly, acknowledging me. Then she stood, slow, graceful despite the limp, and padded back inside. I stood there for a long moment and smiled. She could have left, but she came back. The first time I opened the door and called her name, I half expected silence. Or worse, that empty porch again. But Marla came. Not quickly, not eagerly, but with this calm presence, like she'd been waiting for me to catch up. Her limp had improved, barely noticeable now unless you were really watching. I stood aside and let her out. The air smelled like wet pine and soil. The woods were waking up. The snow had all but melted, leaving behind soft earth and half-dead grass trying to come back to life. Marla paused at the steps. Her nose lifted. She sniffed the breeze, the way someone might smell an old photograph. I watched her eyes, how they moved, slow and searching. She remembered this place, or at least the smells, maybe the sounds. Her ears twitched at a squirrel rattling somewhere in the underbrush. She didn't run, not even when I turned away and sat on the porch. I didn't call her again. She stayed within sight, pacing softly, leaning down now and then to sniff at a tree root or patch of moss. Her movements were cautious, not afraid, just considered. She looked over her shoulder at me once, and there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Not gratitude, not trust, recognition, like she knew me now, knew that I wouldn't hurt her, that I wasn't just a temporary fix between her and death. I started letting her out every morning. Sometimes she'd walk the edge of the yard, never crossing the tree line. Sometimes she'd sit at the stump near the back and just stare into the woods, like she was listening for something I couldn't hear. I told myself I'd be okay if she left one day, if she just didn't come back. But I didn't really believe it. On the 5th morning, I brought out a fresh rabbit I'd snared the day before. I skinned it, cleaned it, laid it out like some kind of offering. She took it from my hands. Not fast, not like an animal starving. Gentle, controlled. She ate near me, within arm's reach. It was around then that Tom showed up. I heard the engine before I saw him. His truck made that high-pitched rattle it always had when he hit the gravel. I stood up, brushing my hands on my jeans as he climbed out. Tom was one of those guys you didn't talk to unless you had to. He wasn't mean, just sharp, blunt. A man with a hunting rifle always mounted in the back window and opinions he didn't filter. He squinted at me, then at Marla, who froze halfway to the porch. "The hell's that?" he asked. I stepped halfway between them. "She's hurt. I've been taking care of her." He looked at her like you'd look at a loaded trap. "That's a lynx, Jack. I know. She's dangerous. She was dying." He took a step forward, lowering his voice. "You're gonna get yourself killed. Or worse, someone else. You think if she gets spooked, she's gonna remember how nice you were with the venison? Come on." Marla didn't move. She watched him, body low but calm, like she was waiting to see what kind of man he really was. "I'm not turning her loose," I said. "She's not ready, and I'm not forcing her to stay either." Tom spit into the dirt. "You always were the bleeding heart. Laura would have told you the same. It's not safe." The mention of her name caught me off guard. "You're giving that cat more chances than you gave yourself," he added. "You want to play vet, fine. But when she snaps, don't act surprised." He turned back to his truck, opened the door, paused. "Keep her on your land. I see her near mine. I won't ask questions." Then he drove off. I stood there, heat rising in my throat. Not anger, not quite, just that heavy knot of being misunderstood. of doing something you can't explain to someone who's never felt empty the way you have. Marla padded toward me, brushing her body along my leg before settling down at my feet. Her eyes followed the truck until the sound faded. "I guess not everyone's a fan," I murmured. She blinked slowly. Her ears flicked, then settled. Inside that day, she stayed close. Not clingy, just present. I moved from one task to another, and she followed, her steps soundless but certain. I sat at the table, she curled under it. I washed dishes, she lay near the door. It was like we were orbiting the same gravity now. That evening, I picked up a picture frame from the shelf. It was Laura, smiling in the sun, holding up a loaf of fresh bread like it was gold. I held it out so Marla could see. "She would have liked you," I said. She believed in second chances. Marla didn't understand the words, but she sat there staring at the photo, like maybe she remembered too. It started with a sound I hadn't heard in years. Metal snapping. I was in the woods checking my old trail cams, trying to get a better sense of the local wildlife traffic. Mostly out of habit, but that sound froze me in place. I knew exactly what it was. A trap. I moved fast. My boots slipped in the thawed mud, and branches clawed at my jacket, but I didn't stop. About 100 yards east of the property line, I saw it. A steel jaw trap clamped around a log. It had been triggered recently, blood smeared on the teeth but no animal in sight. Just a few tufts of gray-brown fur. I knelt beside it. The trap was newer than anything I remembered from my trapping days, maybe one of those no-kill designs, except this one looked anything but humane. I looked around. There were more, hidden beneath brush, half buried near the roots of trees. They weren't mine, and I sure as hell hadn't given anyone permission. Tom. I knew it without needing proof. The man wasn't subtle. He said he'd protect his land, and I guess he figured the woods didn't belong to anyone. Or maybe he thought he was doing the county a favor. Predator control. I turned and ran. Back to the cabin. Back to Marla. She wasn't there. Not in the kitchen. Not near the stove. Not under the table. Not even outside. I called her name. Nothing. At first, I figured she'd wandered a little farther than usual. Maybe toward the creek bed, or the ridge where the rabbits liked to hide. But the more I looked, the more that panic set in. The trap. The blood. I ran back into the woods, yelling her name like an idiot. Birds scattered. My own voice echoed back at me, hollow and desperate. Hours passed. The sky began to shift from gray to gold. My legs burned. My hands were cut. And still nothing. I found more traps. At least 6. One had a squirrel crushed mid-body. Another held a piece of fur I couldn't place. None of them had tags. That made them illegal. I pulled them up, one by one, and hurled them as far as I could into the creek. Tom's land wasn't far from here, and for a second I thought about storming over there, raising hell. But that wouldn't help Marla, so I kept walking. I followed the tracks when I found them, deep paths with a slight drag on the left. Her injured leg still showed in the gate. They led me in circles into a thicket I hadn't walked in since the winter Laura died. And there she was, lying down, not in a trap, not bleeding, just still. I dropped to my knees. Marla, her ears flicked. Alive. I let out a breath so hard it made me dizzy. She didn't move at first, but when I reached for her, she lifted her head slightly. Her eyes met mine. They weren't afraid. They were tired. She'd been running, hiding. From what, I didn't know. Maybe the scent of blood, maybe the sharp metal smells she remembered from long ago. Maybe she just knew the forest wasn't safe anymore. I sat beside her and waited. After maybe 20 minutes, she stood, swayed, walked toward me, and pressed her head against my knee. That was the first time she'd touched me like that. I cried. Not loud, not messy, just tears running down into my beard, my throat clenching, my hands shaking as I rested them on her back. I didn't care if she flinched. I needed that moment, needed to feel something that wasn't fear or guilt or loneliness. Eventually, we walked back together. Slow, no rush. When we got to the cabin, I sat on the porch and she curled beside me. No leash, no cage, just understanding. But something had changed. The woods weren't safe anymore. Later that night, I lit the old kerosene lamp and took out a map, marked the spots I'd found traps, drew a rough circle around our cabin about a mile radius. That's all we had now. Beyond that line, I couldn't protect her. I boarded up the back fence, fixed the broken gate near the shed, added more firewood to the porch, just in case. But mostly I watched the tree line, and I listened. because I knew the season had changed. Not just the weather. It was trap season now, and not every trap had teeth.
If you love stories about wildlife rescue, click the subscribe button below. Here's how the button looks on different devices. Every subscription helps spread these stories and raise awareness. The more people know, the more animals get the help they need. And remember, subscribing is completely free. Click subscribe now and join us in protecting wildlife.
It was the smell that told me something was wrong. That coppery, sour scent of blood carried by the breeze. Faint, but enough to twist my stomach into a knot. I was checking the south fence when it hit me. Marla hadn't come back the night before. That had happened maybe once or twice before, but she always returned by morning. Now the sun was high and the woods were quiet. Too quiet. I followed instinct and the smell. About a quarter mile past the property line, near an old logging trail, I saw her, caught. Her front paw jammed in one of those rusted steel traps I thought I'd cleared. I don't know if it was one I missed or a new one, but it didn't matter. She was lying on her side, breathing hard, her body stiff with pain. The sight of her like that, helpless, shaking, it knocked the air out of my lungs. "Marla," I said softly. She turned her head, barely. Her eyes were glazed with exhaustion, but she knew me. I stepped forward, slow, palms raised. "I've got you. Hang on." The moment I knelt down, I heard the crack. A branch above, or maybe the rotted edge of a dead tree. I didn't have time to look. Came down fast, a massive limb, maybe 30 pounds of soaked wood, and it landed across my back and shoulders. I went down hard. Everything spun. My hands dug into dirt and pine needles. Pain throbbed down my left arm. I tried to move, but the weight had pinned my leg beneath me. I couldn't reach her anymore. Marla whimpered. I gritted my teeth and pushed against the log, but nothing gave. My thigh screamed in pain. I couldn't feel my toes. For a long moment, I just lay there, cheek pressed to the ground, breath coming in broken gasps. The trap, the limb, the irony of it all. We were both caught now. Then something nudged my face. I opened my eyes. Marla, crawling toward me, dragging the trap with her. Her paw was twisted, bleeding badly, but she moved like it didn't matter. Like getting to me was more important than the pain. She leaned down and licked the side of my head. Just once. Then she began pawing at the log. It was pathetic, really, her small weight barely shifting the bark. But she didn't stop. She growled, then howled. A sound I'd never heard from her before. Sharp, guttural, desperate. I tried again, braced my arms, shifted my weight. The pain was blinding, but I managed to move the branch an inch. Then another. Marla kept pulling. Finally, with one last groan, the log rolled just enough for me to slide out. I collapsed next to her. For a second, we both just lay there, side by side, two broken things in the dirt. I sat up, looked at her paw. The trap had bitten deep. Her breathing was shallow. "No more," I said. I reached into my coat and pulled the wire cutters I always carried. It took everything I had to pry the jaws open. When it finally released, she didn't move, just closed her eyes. I gathered her into my arms, slow and careful, and started back. The walk felt endless. My leg was stiff, every step like dragging stone, but I didn't stop. I talked to her the whole way, about nothing, about everything. "You don't owe me anything," I whispered. "You could have left, should have, but you didn't." Back at the cabin, I laid her by the fire, cleaned her wound again, wrapped it tight. She was barely conscious, but her tail twitched when I touched her shoulder. I sat down beside her and took out the old photo of Laura, laid it on the floor where we both could see. "I think she'd understand," I said, letting go, knowing when it's time. I opened the door. The woods were waiting. I looked back at Marla. "You can go," I said. She didn't move. I stepped outside, gave her space, waited. Minutes passed. Then I heard the soft click of claws on wood. She was at the doorway. She didn't look at the trees. She looked at me. Then she stepped forward and lay beside me on the porch. That night, we stayed there until the stars came out. Neither of us spoke, but both of us knew. Spring was ending, and something else was just beginning.